Hi, my name's Kevin, and this is the Bible Artist Podcast. And this is kind of our second discussion of House of David Season 2, episodes 1 to 2. We already did kind of an initial review earlier this week, but now that the episode has actually aired, we'll be able to discuss some of the plot details in greater depth here in this conversation. I'm joined, as always, by my co host Victor, and we are excited to get into more detail on House of David Season 2. Like we said during our initial review, we really loved these first couple episodes. There was so much interesting stuff going on, and the action is just amazing from the start. Goes out off with a bang and keeps on running. So this is definitely a great show for you to check out. If you have not watched through episodes 1 and 2 of the new season, I would suggest doing that before watching this review because we are going to get into spoilers and different stuff like that. And so just kind of consider yourself forewarned. So yeah, we already kind of got into this in our initial review, but I just thought I would bring it up here as well. One thing that from the very start of episode 1 of season 2 that we get is this focus on kind of the idea of a tension between kind of faith versus technology. So there's this long kind of opening narration from Michal where she describes the forging of Goliath's sword. And she describes how this is going to kind of usher in the age of iron. The Philistines thought that if they had the iron, they would be able to triumph and kind of return themselves to their mastery over the Israelites. And then she kind of contrasts that versus kind of like her own view, which is it's not about kind of the sword, it's about the person who wields the sword itself and kind of the power within that person. And so they're definitely kind of setting up a big thematic focus, I think, for the season between kind of trusting in kind of military technology, like iron swords and things like that, and kind of trusting in God and kind of character and things like that, which is the right way for David, but which I think he'll kind of get tempted to stray from at different points during the season. Yeah, I just thought that was a great way to start the season. Kind of sets a clear kind of trajectory for things. Like I said during our review, I also think that they're definitely wanting us to be thinking about the Lord of the Rings because the way that they describe the forging of Goliath's sword should make fans of Lord of the Rings think of the One Ring. May also kind of make us think of a little bit of also like kind of Saruman and his focus on like technology or wheels and that sort of thing. And so they're definitely kind of like painting the Philistines as this force that tries to be kind of autonomous. They're not kind of grounded in the power of faith in the true God, and so they seek power through kind of these other underhanded means, like giants in the first season or in this season, iron swords. Yeah, so I just thought that was a really interesting way for the show to set things up. And I'm really interested to kind of see how that plays out throughout the remainder of the season. Did you kind of have any thoughts?
Yeah, it's very, very much along those same lines, especially the forging of the sword. They kind of really dive into that and really let you see that this is for them, a magic item. This is an item that's going to turn the tide of battle for them, for the Philistines.
And I think it's good to remember that, like, especially back in ancient times, the line between magic and technology, which for us may seem like a very clear line, back then those things are much more mingled. A lot of the kind of accounts of like where the forging of steel, like that technology comes from, people often kind of attribute it to the gods delivering this magical knowledge to humans so that they can use it. Technology is not seen as this thing that we produce as humans. It's seen as like a divine gift that comes down from above, very much like a magic. And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting thing that they're doing. And then over the course of the remainder of episode 1, we see different characters kind of going after the sword of Goliath. Akish clearly wants it. And then, different characters are wielding it. Saul is kind of surprised when his sword gets destroyed by the superior iron sword. And so I definitely think that they're wanting us to think of how characters in the Lord of the Rings are constantly trying to get the One Ring, which a lot of people have said Tolkien was not trying to do like an allegory, but people have drawn connections between the One Ring and nuclear bombs or things like that. It definitely kind of has this sense of like a technical artifice that you can kind of seek power through as opposed to seeking power through kind of more proper means. So I definitely think that they're continuing to try to kind of fuse bits of kind of Tolkien lore or kind of themes from Tolkien with things that are clearly in scripture. As I said in our review, scripture does kind of have this occasional moments where, especially the bad guys, are creating these technologies which inspire fear in the Israelites and cause them to lose faith in God, and as a result be defeated. And so there's this sense of like technology versus faith in scripture itself. Uh, Definitely just
And a
something.
little bit of Excalibur in there too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because yeah, I mean, in the stories like Excalibur, I think it, is kind of a magical sword, and often, in different kind of fantasy depictions and stuff, different characters are going after it and stuff. Yeah,
But yeah, kind of like the One Ring too, though. At the end of it, whenever it's like going from hand to hand as it's making its way through whatever destiny it's going to have. Yeah, it's Doeg that finds it at the end, right?
yeah. And then in episode two, Doeg delivers it to Abner, and eventually Abner brings it to the priest in Nob, and they kind of deposit it in some kind of guarding place for different kind of sacred objects or whatever, which is setting up what I'm guessing is going to be one of the major events of the entire season, which is eventually Saul is going to have Doeg like wipe out the priest of Nob, because when David was fleeing from Saul, he stops at Nob. He doesn't tell the priest that he's fleeing from Saul. He pretends like he's on a mission for Saul, and he asks them for food, and that appears to be okay. But then he also asks them for this sword because he's like, there's no one like it. And in scripture, like it doesn't directly say that what he did was a bad thing, but there are hints that kind of asking for that sword and lying about what why he needs it and stuff was like a mistake for David, like one of his first major mistakes. And so I'm getting the sense that that's kind of how they're going to depict it, as kind of like, you know, there's almost like a kind of a pull to get this technological weapon, and that'll kind of for a little bit send David down the wrong track until he'll eventually kind of repent of that. And they even kind of set this up in season one with that Amalekite dagger that I think Joab gave to David and kind of early in the season. There, David has the right response. Like he immediately like throws it into the fire or something. He's like, I don't want any sort of Amalekite blade or whatever that is cursed or that sort of thing. But here, I'm guessing that as David is on the run and he's in a really desperate situation, and he's maybe also starting to get like a little bit puffed up, a little bit of arrogance after kind of getting promotions and things like that. We'll see him, kind of go for that blade, and that'll like there'll just be kind of like a hint, I think, of it almost kind of being like a, you know, Sildor, taking the ring and making the bad decision.
Yeah, I can see them because I mean clearly they set up the one scene where you see the iron sword just kind of rip through the non-iron. That was it, copper. What
Yeah,
it was made out of.
bronze.
So yeah, so they're still going to have the Israelites are still going to have the inferior weapons.
Yep.
At some point, they're probably going to go into a battle and get wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be attributed to the special weapons or the new weapons, and that'll probably
They need some stuff to happen with the Israelites and the Philistines during this portion of the story, because the Bible itself, it doesn't really give us too much. Like we know that David is going off and he's killing, he kills at least 200 Philistines because he needs to take their foreskins for his bride price for Saul. But we don't have a lot of sense of like what the Philistines were doing, how the different battles were going. We know that David is often successful, but for his successes to feel very meaningful, there's going to have to be this sense of threat from the Philistines. And so, yeah, what I'm guessing is like, there will probably be some sort of a big attack by the Philistines where David won't be there. We'll see the Philistines kind of wipe out a bunch of Israelites, and then that'll kind of establish like how powerful they are. And then eventually, a little bit later in the season, David will lead some soldiers, and they'll be able to defeat the Philistines through cleverness and faith and whatever. And so that'll kind of bump up kind of David's stock as a leader and things like that. But then, like you said, like that'll kind of set up the need or the desire for iron weapons like the Philistines, and so that'll kind of put a sense of like temptation for David to go after this weapon when you should really not be doing that, because especially because it's gonna kind of cause problems for the priests and draw them into lies and things like that. So yeah, I'm definitely kind of interested to see that whole trajectory that they're setting up with the weapons and connections to Lord of the Rings and things like that. Yeah, we already kind of did our review of the battle. Like we said during our other episode, yeah, it's an epic battle to start out the season. Episode one, really kind of we both loved kind of the cloudy, dusty atmosphere that creates this sense of like kind of confusion, and we have different characters, they aren't able to find where other characters are. So like a lot of episode one is basically like different characters like trying to find where David is, and then they find him, but then someone gets shot or something bad happens, and or David goes and runs off to do something else, and then people are looking for Saul or for whatever, which is very true to how battles are probably. I've never been in a battle, but from what I understand, there's a lot of chaos that happens, especially in ancient battles, where they don't have earpieces where they can communicate with each other. You have a very limited perspective on what's happening. If they were fought in a dusty area, then yeah, there'd be clouds of dust shooting up in the air, further kind of limiting your visibility and stuff like that. So yeah, I just really appreciate kind of what they did with the battle sequences.
Yeah, I don't know how many images you're going to be showing, but like the one you've got on the screen right now, it's like it looks really good. It looks like there's a cast of thousands. It's like there's a full army, and every shot you see of a battle on any kind of scale, you get that massive sense of thousands of people running at each other and attacking. It's like it's there. I've seen so many battle scenes where they kind of cheapen out at the last second
Yeah.
because they don't want to show it, and they just stay focused on one-on-one battles. And this gives you equal number of wide vistas showing the whole battle playing out and
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff, as well as all the individual battles. So I was very impressed with what they did on a TV show that wasn't
Yep.
called Game of Thrones.
Speaking of the battle, we were not able to share this in our earlier review, but the Giants are back. So they don't like feature like prominently throughout the episode, but there's kind of a major reveal towards the end of episode one where Jonathan, I think, is about to defeat Akish, and then the giant comes and knocks him out of the way and picks up Akish and hauls him off, which is kind of funny, like the giant like carrying his boss away. I feel like that's it made me think of like one of a giant character in one of my kids' cartoon shows. But anyway, I'm glad that they are kind of keeping the giants involved. They're reminding us that Goliath was not the only giant; that he had his brothers, and so it makes sense that they would show up and try to kind of protect their king. And so I'm definitely thinking that we'll continue to see them at play throughout the season, even if they can't kill too many of them off, because the biblical account has most of them being killed off by David's warriors after he becomes king. But I wouldn't be surprised if like we have like maybe one boss fight in season two where someone else, maybe Jonathan, gets to prove his bravery and power or whatever by taking one of them out. Yeah, and then I don't have a picture of Agag, but they bring him back. He continues to kind of harass Saul. It's like a little bit of a retread on some of the kind of beats or things that we got in season one, but like it didn't bother me too much because visually, like it was like a cool way to do it. Like Saul's in this like burning forest, and yeah, the visuals of kind of his confrontation with Agag are pretty interesting. And I like that like the show helps us see how Saul thinks he has defeated Agag, even though like as viewers we realize like this is just some spirit in your head, and so stabbing it with a sword is not going to actually deal with your problems.
Mm.
It kind of visualizes how Saul thinks that he can solve a lot of his problems with battles. He doesn't think that he actually has to kind of do the inner work of repentance and kind of dealing with some of the demons that are inside of him. He thinks that he can just go, stabbing at things and try to win in a more kind of traditional warrior king type of mode.
He's
Yeah.
just
Do you have any
relying on
thoughts about?
himself and his own. Just exactly what you're saying. Just he's relying on himself and on his own technology or battle skills rather than
Yeah.
relying on God. So I mean, it's just kind of it makes it very visceral and on the screen what's
Yeah.
going on in his head.
Oh, yeah. I don't I've been,
It'll be fun if I'm sure Agag's going to come back, unless they're going to
or maybe it'll be like some sort of other kind of
a different
visualization
one.
of, yeah. Well, they're kind of in the middle of the battle. We start to get to see some of the relationship between David and Jonathan. And I know that you've like really been looking forward to kind of that aspect of the story. I'm curious what you had to think or what you thought of what they did with those two.
I mean, we didn't get a whole lot, but it
Yeah.
did progress it a little bit. But it just kind of showed that they had their handshake. We're brothers kind of
Right.
arm handshake. Saul didn't quite like that. You can see Saul was kind of
Mhm.
already clocking that something was going on, that he was losing his son to some
Yeah.
other relationship. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting slow burn as we kind of see them develop. But you can tell they've got a connection that other people around them don't quite understand.
Yeah. Like I like that they have Jonathan kind of take on this mentor role of like, teaching David how to fight in a battle when he's never fought before. And so, teaching him like, stab, don't slash and things like that. Because, Jonathan he's older than David. And so it makes sense that he would be kind of a mentor to David, even if they are friends, even if he does end up kind of like submitting himself to David in different ways. I like that there's kind of he gets to play that bit of a role in the relationship. Yeah, like you said, like there's going to be like a lot more to their friendship, but I like what we've gotten so far, and I feel like it's setting up kind of more stuff that'll come as
To my knowledge, or my memory, the Bible never really portrays it as Jonathan being that much older or that much more of a mentor. I always saw them as just kind of more equal or closer to the same age and just kind
I
of going
think if
through
you
the same
actually
stuff.
like
So, but
kind of
I really like how they're doing it here.
if you actually like kind of look at the biblical narrative, like I think it makes sense that Samuel or that Jonathan is a little bit older than David because he's fighting in battles kind of earlier in the narrative when David would have been younger and like too young to fight, and so it makes sense that he's older, he's more experienced. But the Bible never kind of explicitly kind of draws that out, and so that's one of the values of a show like this is that they're able to be like, okay, well, based on what we know, like Jonathan would have been older, so it would make sense that he would kind of be playing this kind of mentorish type role with David. So I think
But
that's
I like the way we see the age. It gives more of a power to the submission that Jonathan's doing
yeah, yeah,
to David. Is like he's clearly the older, wiser, more battle experienced in all the ways that than David, and yet he's going to submit himself to David, which
yeah.
is
In a
important.
lot of ways, that allows Jonathan to be kind of a contrast to Eliab, who, yeah, has a little bit harder time offering that submission to his younger brother, which makes all kinds of psychological sense. But it's one thing to be happy for your brother to defeat the big giant and get celebrated and stuff like that. It's a completely other thing to be like, oh, my brother is the commander in front of me, like in charge of me, when I've been fighting and trying to advance along through the normal means, and then suddenly my brother, who was not even a warrior 10 seconds ago, suddenly like skipped way ahead of me and is like above me. And on top of that, Eliab, he's happy that David is safe. But we can share this. This is a spoiler for anyone who has not seen episode one. The death of one of their other brothers, Nathaniel, the cowardly brother, who finally gets to kind of have his moment of bravery right before he dies, which is classic trope. I feel like works well, even though like what's happening. That only kind of creates a sense of dread as it's going on. But that's all kind of in the background too, because when Eliab and when Nathaniel got shot, I think they were looking for David, and so in some sense, Eliab probably kind of blames David a little bit, but he can't vocalize that because everybody's celebrating David, and he doesn't want to.
And Daniel was supposed to be protecting David.
Yes,
David got it. David got away.
yeah, yeah, and so they because of that, they were looking for him, and they were, and kind of in the chaos of the battle, that's when he got struck by the arrow, and so he's got to have all kinds of kind of emotional stuff going on inside his head. So it completely made sense to me when he ended up like socking David And I thought their little like fist fight and stuff, I thought it was like pretty good to kind of show that like I don't know, like Eliab, he doesn't know how to kind of express all the different emotions that he has, and so he just like goes at David, and David doesn't really know kind of what to do with that starting out, and he's like trying to make peace with them, and then eventually he gets frustrated and tries to fight back. So yeah, I liked kind of their relationship and the way that the it would have been very easy for the show, after season one where Eliab kind of has this realization like I haven't, I've doubted my brother, I shouldn't have doubted him. It would be easy for him to not really have an arc in season two, but they found a way to kind of complicate his character and continue to have him kind of struggle with the place of his brother and what it's going to look like. And eventually, I'm sure that'll resolve with him choosing to follow David when David goes and is an outlaw or whatever. But that'll make that like a really interesting decision when it actually
So,
happens.
brotherly jealousy is a very common storyline in the Bible.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great
Um,
contrast with Jonathan. So
yeah.
you pointed that.
It's like they're both like people who are, having David kind of pushed in front of them in terms of like a position, and Jonathan has the humility to be able to kind of immediately just go with the flow
Mhm.
and be behind David and supporting him. Whereas, yeah, Eliab, he's a little more resistant at this point. Eventually, I think he's going to get there.
And both brothers, both Jonathan and Eliab know and understand that David has been anointed.
Yeah.
They they understand the gravity and the authority that has been put on him. And Jonathan is where it's threatening his livelihood. He's accepting it, where Eliab, who is just is he's rejecting it, even though they both have that same information source.
And I mean, for Jonathan, it's much more of a threat. For Eliab, like his brother becoming the king and all this, that'll ultimately like be pretty good for him. Like he wasn't ever going to become king himself. Having a brother be king is actually like pretty good for you. Still, like kind of psychologically being willing to submit to your younger brother that you always look down on and always kind of uh, been protective of, but also a little like arrogant towards. Yeah, that's like a journey that he's going to have to go through. So yeah, I like to how the show is kind of exploring some of these different dynamics from different angles. Yeah, we already hit on Samuel a little bit, but yeah, you mentioned that they didn't go like full Gandalf with him, but they definitely did like a little bit of
A little
Gandalf.
bit,
Episode one, where
little
he's like
Gandalf.
fighting with his sword and his staff at the same time. That's like totally Ian McKellen in the Peter Jackson
Mhm.
movies and the way that they have him fight. So another little allusion
Yeah,
to those movies that they're definitely wanting us to make. And also,
when he was up on the ridge. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, they're definitely going for like Moses over the battle between the Israelites and the Amalekites, where Moses has to hold up his staff, which the Promised Land does very funny take on. But this is kind of the more kind of serious take on it. Samuel's kind of being another Moses figure who is kind of helping enable the Israelites to triumph through his prayer, which I think is like a cool thing for them to be like depicting as far as like kind of like showing the power of prayer in a way that's like not like it's not
It's
like
not magic.
just as one prayer and that like magically like solves the battle, but you kind of get the sense that you know it is kind of affecting things, even if we're not seeing like he's not like calling down a lightning bolt on someone or
Right.
something like very specific, but it's
Yeah.
a cool way to get the idea that like prayer changes things into kind of popular consciousness and like see it in a concrete way, even if it's not like, well, like not making it look like magic or something. So I like that whole use of Samuel throughout episode one. I loved kind of his like confrontation with Saul at the end of the episode. And yeah, like we said, like I loved kind of some of his conversations with Ahinoam in episode two. I liked like her little story about how she saw her brother, her sister, basically like revived or resurrected after dying or almost dying in the river or whatever. And then, that gives us like some clarity into like why she still is kind of holding on to hope for Saul to be able to come back after everything that he's been through. But then, yeah, I loved Samuel's rebuttal where she's like, couldn't God have mercy on my husband or whatever. And Samuel's like he could, but he hasn't. Which is like, yeah, that's rough. But like that's one of the dynamics that you have to grapple with as you're reading through some of these stories. Like in theory, like, God could potentially like save some of these characters, like show some sort of sign or do something, but he doesn't step in sometimes in those ways for certain characters. Certain characters, yeah, they're kind of given over.
Samuel still kind of put it back on Saul, though.
Places he does. Yeah, like in other places he talks about how Saul is kind of binding himself through his pride. Like it's definitely not like that God is like making him
Right.
make these choices. God is just kind of allowing him to experience the consequences of his self kind of aggrandizement, his arrogance, his desire for his own glory and things like that. So it's not that the show is like blaming God, but it is kind of exploring some of the kind of complicated dynamics of like why does God sometimes step in for some people, and Saul's on the road to Damascus and God opens his eyes when Saul was different Saul, Saul that becomes Paul. He was a bad guy at that point, but God somehow changed his heart, whereas he does not do that with King Saul. And that's like the Bible doesn't give us a clear answer of like why God shows up for some people and not for others. But I like that they don't get like in depth into it, but I like that they kind of bring that.
Well, it's like, and just kind of like, I guess with real life Christianity,
Yeah,
it's like, I think we're all given that choice.
yeah,
And Saul in this show is given the choice, and he rejects it. Saul that becomes Paul is given that choice, and he does accept Jesus. It's like they're given the choice, and I think we're all given that choice. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing represented is like, here's the opportunity for you to repent, to trust, whatever that particular aspect needs to be done. And what are you going to do with that?
yeah. And yeah, I don't know. I like that they are kind of exploring some of these deep questions through Samuel. They also have, so Samuel kind of does the thing that he did to Saul to Doeg as well, and kind of puts him into this dark world or like kind of spiritual state or whatever. Which like I realized as they did that what they're doing is, so the Bible talks about Saul being visited by evil spirits. But it also later on, there's a scene where after David goes on the run, at one point he goes and joins Samuel for a bit, and Saul's like chasing after him. And then Samuel does something to Saul where Saul like falls down on the floor, and like it says that he's like prophesying and he's like stripped naked, and he's like there's the sense that he's kind of in this weird state. So like what I think that they're trying to do is kind of create like a connection between those different things that Samuel is doing. Because the scripture doesn't like explicitly connect those two things, but I think they're kind of like setting up that Samuel has this kind of power to put people into some sort of prophetic state where they are kind of seeing the unseen world, the spiritual world, and that is kind of when someone gets forced to experience that isn't prepared for it. It can be kind of this overwhelming experience. I don't know, that was interesting to me. Like I'm still like a little plus minus on some of the effects of the unseen world where it's kind of gray and blurry. I mean, you like it? Okay. I liked when we got to Doeg and we saw like the crows and the other like dark animals and stuff that were there. That was cool to me. Sometimes I'm like a little like so on the kind of unseen world bits, but it's a small thing and it doesn't usually like take me out of it. But generally, I like what they're doing with Samuel. Like you said, how he's not to like, even though he's got some Gandalf touches, his power is very clearly grounded on God, and basically his message is constantly like, you just got to submit to God. God's not gonna bow to your demands. He's not gonna. I can't re-anoint you and like try to honor you before the people just because you won the battle. That's not really what matters. What matters is what God says to me, and I have to go with that, not with what you say because you're king or whatever.
Yeah, I like a lot of what when the people come to him, like when Eliab comes to him, it's like it's very reasonable requests.
Yes.
You would think we just won a battle. We just won a battle for Israel. We're God's
Yeah.
people. Why can't we have some nice things given to us? You
Yeah.
would think that's like, just do this one little thing. How hard can it be?
Yeah.
Like, well, it's not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that there's like a really interesting thing that they're doing as far as like kind of exploring like we think like, oh, if I won the battle, like, that means that God must be on my side. That must mean that, maybe God can do me a favor because, I won this battle, my champion. But Samuel kind of provides a really great kind of counterpoint to that. Yeah, I don't know. I love some of the theological stuff that they're doing with his character. Even though these specific changes aren't in scripture, they're definitely kind of communicating a biblical theology as far as like the role of the prophet and what the prophet, his role in terms of like holding kings accountable and how God would look at kings and how kings would often view themselves instead of like kind of the false way that they would view themselves and their power. So they're doing a lot of interesting things in kind of setting up some of these different dynamics. Yeah, as far as kind of David's relationship with Saul, did you have any thoughts on it?
No, just kind of like what you mentioned earlier is that it looks like we're going to be pushing off the Saul going complete full
Yeah,
Saul. He's kind of, we pulled back, but we know that that's kind of what happens is that they go through stages of like, oh, hey, you're here in my room. That level of trust. I think we even get the sort of a flash forward. And what was it? What did they say? 6 months earlier
one
is
year.
when we flash back to, or 1 year? Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So we get to see a little bit of, they're more buddies down the
yeah.
line, but there's still something going on that we get.
Yeah. No, I didn't like the flash forward in season one, but I think this one makes a lot of sense because you want to kind of give us a sense of kind of impending doom. Like as we're seeing kind of the things looking positive, we want to get the sense of like, but like all this is gonna go to crap. Like it's looking good right now, but we know kind of where things are headed, and that's kind of constantly overshadowing the positive interactions that they're having. So we as viewers are having a very different experience than the characters themselves are having in the middle of the story itself. Yeah, and yeah, I also just like the way that they have Saul like kind of using David. He's like, he's my champion that I chose. Like, it's a
Yeah,
way to kind of get at his arrogance, but it's like a little more endearing than just like him kind of thumping his own chest. Like, he does like love David in a sense, but it's in a kind of selfish way. He loves
he's
David
still
as
taking
a
credit
tool for
for it.
himself. Yeah, yeah, exactly. A tool to kind of like build himself up. So obviously it'll be once he's kind of once David and him are kind of not united in terms of like uh, building David up no longer kind of builds up his own power. Once he starts to see like, oh, David might actually be a threat when it's things are going to go bad. I like that they're kind of like slowly walking us through different stages in that relationship so that we can kind of like process through things. Like this is why it's useful to have a long series to explore some of these stories so that we don't have to like rush characters straight to having kind of their worst impulses. We can see how characters kind of slowly descend from still being flawed. It's not like it's very clear that Saul, he's not just like a purely good character in his approach to David, but he's at least more sympathetic. But we're kind of cued into the sense of like, okay, we know where things are heading. And so that makes us kind of more view things a little more like skeptically and see kind of like, oh, okay, I can see where that bit of Saul is going to go wrong and how that's going to affect things. And also, that also gives us a perspective on some of the different kind of schemes and people that are in the background, like plotting to try to get power. It hints to us like, okay, like these different people, like eventually they're going to have some success. So looks like Adriel and Jordan, they are going to be involved in some sort of plot. I'm guessing that, so Adriel, I think he hints that he has some sort of like information. I assume that he knows that Samuel visited the tribe of Jesse because I think,
I think they did.
uh,
Didn't they show something about that in season one?
yeah,
Yeah,
because
showing
like
him.
I think Adriel was one of the elders that Samuel came to when he was looking for Jesse, and so he definitely like has information about David. What I'm guessing now at this point is that that information is what he's going to trade to eventually get himself Mirab after David has turned down the offer or whatever. So yeah, there's that little plot, and then whatever's going on with Eshbal and like Ahinoam and even Mirab herself kind of, yeah, it's cool to see how like things are like more positive for David at this point, but we have this sense of like all these different plots are kind of swirling around, and eventually it's all gonna kind of come together in a big kind of cataclysm that's gonna kind of ruin his relationship with Saul. So
Yeah.
I think they set that up well, where he hit David and Eliab. Yeah, and then like we said, David is gonna have some romantic troubles. So as we've been predicting, when Saul initially offers Mirab to David, that is because Mirab has kind of been pushing Saul to make good on kind of her first failed marriage offer, which he screwed up because of going crazy and stuff. So that wasn't a surprise that that's kind of was one of the main factors that was involved. I like that like kind of Eshbal also kind of pushed Mirab, and he was like, us two, we think so little of ourselves and we never ask for things, which it feels like very, from one perspective, it sounds like a kind thing, like to try to build someone up that, like, if they genuinely are like just so down on themselves that they never try to get good things for themselves. But on the other hand, it, feels a little bit like kind of the tempter, and we still don't know kind of fully what's behind Eshmal, where he's been, uh, why he's thinking from a different perspective now. He's not drinking, he's not partying. But yeah, I like that they kind of used him as the catalyst that got Mirab to push Saul. And yeah, and I like that, Saul, I think he's just kind of oblivious to David and Michal's like romance, even though like David, he did kind of bring it up to Saul back in season one, but I think at that point, Saul was just looking at David as like a servant boy, so he probably didn't even clock it. He just thought it was like a ridiculous idea and didn't like probably take it seriously. And so like I just think Saul, he's not really that aware of what's going on with David and Michal because they've been kind of hiding it. And so he probably doesn't even realize that he's like totally screwed things over with Michal. And yeah, I love
I,
that.
yeah, I think he's more just he's in full patriarchy mode where his daughters are just bargaining chips. They're
Yeah.
things that he owns that he's gonna do something with to increase his value or provide
Mhm.
something for him.
And like the older one traditionally like gets first dibs, and so and it's just she asked for it, and so okay, I said yes. And yeah, I'm interested to kind of see where the story goes from here. And yeah, I
Yeah, they're painting Mirab as more of a manipulator, like kind of like her mom.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what the relationship between the two of them looks like. And it's good that like episode one kind of had like a bonding moment of the two of them kind of getting away from the bad guys or whatever, just to kind of reinforce that like they had this kind of sisterly love for each other, which now is going to totally be shattered after Mirab totally went behind her sister's back and stole her boy or whatever. One other thing while we're here, I feel like the opening narration for episode two kind of gives us our first hint of where things are going to go with David and Nicole, and like kind of the how it's going to go south with them. Because Nicole, like, the way that she describes how, the fall of her father's house was not due to things without, but, from the one that he trusted most and the one that I loved. She's saying that in past tense, which hints that she's no longer in love with David whenever she's doing this narration. So
mhm.
it hints to us that just like things go south with David and Saul, as we see kind of in their fight, things are also going to eventually go south with David and Michal as well. So I like that we also kind of got a little hint of that, just a slight bit of foreshadowing for people who are paying close attention.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna get a lot of flip flopping for David's perceived because everything's looking good for him right now, but then right at the end of the episode, everything kind of flips on him. I think we're gonna get a lot of that for him, where things are gonna look bad and then they're gonna turn out good, and he's gonna be the main one that gets a lot of that happen to him.
Yeah, but I think um, one interesting thing is that I'm guessing that the show is going to depict the kind of the ruin of his relationship with Saul as primarily not being his fault. It's because of all these different schemers and the different things that are going on. Whereas kind of the complicated nature of his relationship with McCall, biblically speaking, that's at least like partially kind of on him. It seems like. So that'll be interesting to see, like if um, especially, he's going to eventually take on other wives. I assume that they'll probably do that, even though it'll be kind of a difficult bit. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm just interested at the ways that they're going to kind of explore. Like, I feel like we're getting hints this season, not only that like David's life is going to get worse, but also that he's going to start to experience like temptation. He's going to start to get pulled by power or by kind of other concerns, and even the things that he really cared about early on, the things that kind of most endeared us to him, like his love for Michal. Even at this early stage, those things we're starting to see little cracks, which aren't very big right now, but are eventually going to grow into something much bigger. Because I'm guessing Michal, she's going to be annoyed that like David didn't like offer more like pushback initially with when Saul puts his hand on Mirab, and David's like kind of caught off guard. So we can totally understand. It's like, what are you gonna do? Like the king is offering you his daughter. Like, are you gonna insult him by saying no immediately in that moment? And we know that eventually he is going to kind of find a way out of it. But I'm guessing she's gonna like hold a little bit of resentment over kind of his initial acceptance of it or seeming acceptance of it. And that'll be kind of the first little crack that eventually grows into a bigger fracture for their relationship. We already hit a little bit on Eshbal. Do you have, yeah, just any kind of thoughts on
This one's kind of like, I don't know where they're going with this. Is this the completely sort of most made up
yeah,
storyline out of all of this? And, it's very Game of Thrones kind of, palace intrigue, scheming and stuff like that. We'll see where it goes. I mean, it's not uninteresting. It's just, I find it the least interesting out of all the different storylines going on.
I agree with that. Yeah. Uh, like part of me is like, I don't know why, like part of me gets why they are trying to keep everything in the dark with him, but I don't know if it actually, like part of me thinks that if you actually gave us a little bit more information, it would be more interesting to know kind of what's motivating him at this point and kind of what he's representing and all that. But I don't know. We'll see. It's hard to evaluate when we don't know kind of what's going to come with the character. I already commented on him, but yeah, she didn't have like as many big moments in these episodes, but I continue to like her as a character.
Very complicated.
Yeah. Drill, yeah. I mean, we already kind of commented on that. It's looking like he's going to be kind of one of the people who is kind of scheming behind David's back. I'm guessing so. When he gives that information to Saul, that's going to be probably the thing that really pushes Saul over the edge, so that he starts to see David as a potential threat. And then we'll get the Saul trying to kill David by sending him on this quest to kill 100 Philistines or whatever. Like that'll be kind of Saul's way out of that situation, and then David will overcome that. And so yeah, I'm interested to kind of see. So I mean, I guess Adriel's plot is going to be if I can marry the king's daughter, then yeah, then potentially I'm getting putting my children in line to get onto the throne. But that's gotta, yeah, that'll
Yep.
be like really weird for Jordan. Like if they do go with like Adriel marrying, like it's possible that they're gonna make it feel like a little less gross by changing things a little bit and having it be that Jordan is the one that marries Mirab instead of Adriel himself. But if they stick with the biblical picture and it's Adriel, then that's gonna, yeah, that's gonna
I
be
just think
really,
just because of her, Mirab and Michal's distaste with Adriel,
yeah,
that's where it's going to end up. It's like
yeah,
that's going to be Mirab's punishment, consequences for
yeah,
going down this path. You get to
yeah.
be with the creepy old guy.
Yep.
Congratulations.
And I think I mentioned this before. Like, I'm guessing so they could kill off Adriel's current wife, or they could use this as an opportunity to establish the idea of multiple marriages as a way of kind of aggrandizing your power and building alliances and stuff like that. So it'd be like a way to kind of set that up so that when David comes on the scene and starts marrying other women, it's still going to be weird
Normalized a
and
little
it's going to
bit.
be creepy, but we'll have like a concept of it and we'll understand kind of why this is a practice, like what he's doing it for and what he's after.
Political reasons why you have to do it.
Yeah.
So they'll probably show David not wanting to do it, but
Yeah.
he's going to have to do it because that's what you do if you're a king. That's just how it works.
I like how we, by the way, little offside comments. So we were part of a project where we kind of did our own adaptation of some of the some of the stories that we'll probably be getting in season two. But we kind of focused on David's time in the wilderness on the run from Saul. And so we had to explore David's multiple marriages. And I feel like we did a pretty good job of kind of threading that needle of like exploring the problems with it while also helping us understand why David might eventually end up like doing it and making a decision that we know is wrong, but we can get where he's coming from. But yeah, I think this might be the last bit. Akish and the Philistines. I mean, we already kind of hit on this at the start of the episode, but they're kind of building up on this idea of like iron as being kind of the game changer that the Philistines are going after. Now that kind of Goliath has died, and so they've realized like, okay, like having a really awesome champion, that's not necessarily the answer. It looks like kind of building up technology is going to be the storyline of the Philistines. So yeah, I think it makes sense as a good kind of story for them to put on. I'm not like a expert historian, so I don't know like, how accurate it is as far as like whether the Philistines would have had iron before or if this is too early or anything like that. Like at generally the idea that, somewhere around this period, some countries were starting to uh, get this really powerful technology of iron, which had all these kind of military implications, and that in turn kind of created different dynamics as far as like learning to trust God, even when your enemies had superior technology and stuff like that. I think that's like really interesting, and yeah, and it's going to give Akish something interesting to do. We know that he needs to continue to kind of be involved and be a character who's doing things so that eventually he can play different biblical parts that he has down the road.
Correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, but this scene kind of complicates the scene where like didn't David act crazy in front of Akish whenever he does that?
Yeah, he's going to. Yeah.
So this seems to me like because they had such a close interaction in this episode, it just seems like well he would know clearly that David didn't act like that or something like that because having met him already. For the other
Well,
scenes, their
so
interaction works better when they've never met before face to face.
yeah, I'm not sure about that because when the reason David has to put on kind of the sense that he's crazy is because he knows that once Akish finds out who he is, Akish will have heard of David and he'll think like, well, this is like a dangerous foe. Like I have to kill him or whatever. So what I think David is doing is when he's acting crazy, the idea is not that he's been crazy this entire time. The idea is that maybe he's been struck crazy and that's why he is no longer in the service of Saul. Akish will think that, oh, he must have gone, like the gods must have struck him crazy for, you know, maybe like his interpretation will be like the gods are getting him
That
back
works.
for killing Goliath or whatever. And they've, given him this kind of evil spirit that's driving them all crazy or whatever. But I don't want that I don't want that problem in my kingdom. I'm gonna try to get rid of him. I don't want a crazy person. I don't want to, but I also don't want to kill him because if the gods are doing something, I don't want to mess with what they're doing. So, yeah, I think it can still work with what's going to happen. Yeah.
One thing we're done on this one, but it's like
Mhm.
you didn't put in there Saul and his nurse. I mean Saul, Jonathan and his nurse that kind of nursed him.
Oh yeah,
So I'm guessing that's who's going to be his wife at some point.
yep.
I'm trying to remember. It's like, did they ever name her in the Bible?
Yeah, maybe if you look in the genealogies, it's possible you might be able to find it, but often you can't find the names of wives and stuff like that. Maybe I'll try to go back and look because what I'm guessing is that they need him to have a wife so that his son Mephibosheth can be born. Because like in
Yeah.
theory, they could have said like he had a son already earlier from the wife that died, but because like the son hasn't been like on screen or whatever, it would be strange to introduce him at this point. And so it makes a lot more sense if they introduce a new wife, have her give birth. Like she'll probably give birth like right before the big battle, and then there'll be this like dramatic thing when she's like in pregnancy or like in the throes of labor as the battle is going on and stuff. Yeah, I definitely think that they're kind of setting that up. Yeah, I would I was fine with it. Like it, um, yeah, they're just kind of hinting at romance and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I didn't have like any strong feelings about.
Now, one thing is like I know we kind of talked about the speed at which they have produced this season,
Hmm.
I would almost think that this first episode was maybe even originally intended to be the end of season one, just because it is such a rousing event that it could have really worked well as the last episode of last season.
Yeah, at the very least, I wouldn't be surprised if they shot it all with season one, like that that entire episode. Because like they probably would have wanted like people in a
Matt,
similar state of like kind of like clothing and makeup and all that stuff. And so that could be one of the reasons why they were able to produce the season so quickly, because maybe they shot that episode or other different sequences from the season during kind of the shots for the season one. Yeah, it could be that they originally plotted that one as the actual closer. I kind of think that they probably, I don't know. I feel like the fall of Goliath probably always the intended end of the season, and that they just wanted like an action-packed opener to season two. But it's possible that because you're right that there are like a lot of like things from season one that are getting paid off in that opening. You know.
it works either way though. It was a great way
Yeah.
to start season
Yeah.
one. Hopefully, you'll get to interview him and ask him
Yeah.
specifically
Yeah,
on
that
the
would be
project.
great.
And he directed it too. John Irwin directed the that
Oh
first
yeah.
episode. So that was I'm kind of I don't think he's ever directed anything like that. Didn't he do he did Jesus
I can
Revolution,
only
right?
imagine maybe or Jesus Revolution. Yeah. Yeah. Mostly like kind of more,
Not a lot of
like
battles.
like yeah. So I'm like so impressed like that he was able to orchestrate like, you know, it's not like that the battle kind of maneuverings and stuff were like super complicated, but yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it's pretty impressive as like a an action-packed episode of television.
Like I say, we've seen a million of these kind of giant battles where they're trying to do stuff in between. And I think we always kind of knew where we were in the battle.
Mhm.
We knew what the stakes were at any given moment. We knew
Yep.
what these characters are trying to, get David to safety,
Yep.
and whatever's happening around them, that was preventing them from doing that. We always
Yep.
had that kind of that geography figured out of where this was, where that was, where
Yep.
the girls were, what they were trying to do,
Yep.
where Saul was, where Jonathan was. I mean, it all kind of worked, and you never lost track, or you never got, even though we were talking about the fog of war, it wasn't the fog of war for the viewer. We always kind of
Yep.
knew exactly where we were, and that worked. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't seen that kind of a battle scene done as well as that in a long time since
Yeah,
Game of
and
Thrones.
they didn't need like some like big kind of like gimmick to make the battle interesting. Like often, like I feel like you get this in like Rings of Power where there's some sort of like big trick that is the like the turn of the battle or whatever, which sometimes that it's interesting, but like with this one, it's not like what made it interesting was that they suddenly like the Israelites pulled out like special weapon or like there's some sort of like big like surprise or whatever. It was just like well shot
Well,
fighting.
if
It was more like character driven as a battle.
if it was the Rings of Power people doing it, they would have all of a sudden, and here's the Ark of the Covenant
Yeah,
that we're pulling out in
yeah,
the middle of the battle, or
yep,
something from, well, that's supposed to be 4,000 years from now, or 4,000
yeah,
years earlier. That shouldn't be here. We don't care. We're putting it in here because it's cool.
yeah. Okay, well, yeah, it was like I said, really great experience watching episodes one and two. So if you've been watching this up until this point and you haven't watched the actual episodes, I don't know what you're doing, but definitely go out and watch them. And if you have not watched, or if you've watched them, watch them again. I definitely think that, yeah, season two of House of David, it's looking to be like just as, if not better, than season one. So I'm really excited to see everything that's ahead. But yeah, you can definitely join us in the future. We'll continue to be sharing our thoughts on the different episodes of season two. We probably won't do like a double episode thing like this for each of the different episodes of season two, but we'll be doing analysis and things like that. And yeah, we're going to be also covering it on thebibleartist.com. I'll do my written reviews and analysis there as well. So thanks everybody for joining us for now, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe and all that stuff. But till next time, Godspeed.